By the time millionaire Clara realized it, it was too late. Her best friend had run away with... Claire Carter was the embodiment of glamour and elegance. At just 28 years old, she stood out as the marketing director of one of the largest cosmetics companies in the country, Luminous Beauty, founded by her father, Henry Carter. That night, like many others, Claire was the center of attention at a luxurious event hosted by the company. The ballroom was breathtaking, with crystal chandeliers illuminating the space and spotlights highlighting every detail of the tables adorned with white roses and silk tablecloths. At the heart of it all, Claire walked gracefully in an exclusive red dress, drawing admiring and even envious looks. Around her, friends and admirers gathered, praising her beauty and the innovative campaigns that had propelled Luminous Beauty to the top. In a corner of the room, Henry, her father, observed her with a stern expression. A pragmatic and demanding businessman, he valued results above all else. Beside him stood Laura Mendez, Claire's friend and the company's financial director, a charismatic woman with sweet words and a smile that concealed her true ambition. Impatient, Henry approached Claire. With a touch on her shoulder, he excused them from the surrounding guests. "Claire, can we talk?" he asked in a tone that sounded more like an order. With no alternative, she followed her father to a more private corner. Henry wasted no time. "Do you think you're here just to parade around? This event isn't just a glamour show. It's about the expansion of Luminous Beauty. We need you genuinely involved in the business, Claire." Claire tried to maintain her composure, but her father's firm voice always rattled her. "I'm the marketing director, Dad. My campaigns have placed Luminous Beauty at the top. Isn't that enough?" Henry sighed, impatient. "That's just the tip of the iceberg. If you don't stop blindly trusting Laura and start paying attention to the numbers, you might find that pretty campaigns don't save a company from financial trouble." Without waiting for a response, Henry walked away, leaving Claire confused and uncomfortable. Before she could pull herself together, Laura appeared as usual with a reassuring smile. "He never changes, does he?" Laura said, handing Claire a champagne glass. "Don't worry. I'll handle the hard part while you shine for the public. That's what we do best together." Claire smiled, grateful for the support, unaware that behind that smile lay hidden motives. Back in the ballroom, Claire resumed her role as the star of the evening, posing for photographers and smiling at the guests. In the days following the luxurious event, Claire Carter barely had time to rest. Between meetings and marketing commitments, her schedule was packed, but something strange began to catch her attention. Urgent messages from suppliers, bounced checks, and unexpected billing emails started piling up. She trusted Laura Mendez completely, her friend and the head of finances at Luminous Beauty, but these notifications began raising suspicions. Even so, Claire believed everything would be resolved. Laura always had an explanation for any problem. One cloudy morning, Claire was in her office reviewing a new advertising campaign when her assistant burst in, looking pale and holding a tablet. "Claire, you need to see this," he said, his voice trembling. On the screen was an article from a financial blog revealing that Laura Mendez had transferred millions from Luminous Beauty's accounts to offshore accounts. The news went viral within minutes, and shareholders began calling, demanding answers. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. With trembling hands, she tried calling Laura, but her phone was off. Desperate, Claire rushed to her father Henry's office, only to find a man colder and more distant than ever. "I warned you, Claire. I told you that you needed to take control. Now look where your blind trust has led us," he said, throwing a report onto the desk. The report confirmed it. Luminous Beauty was on the brink of bankruptcy. Laura Mendez had disappeared with almost all the company's funds, leaving Claire as the sole person accountable to the shareholders and the law. "Dad, I didn't know," Claire tried to explain, but Henry interrupted her with a cold glare. "I always knew you weren't ready for this world. All you care about is appearances and trivialities, Claire. Now deal with the consequences of your mistakes. Pay back every cent of this debt and leave my company. If we ever recover the lost money, I'll return it to you. Until then, you're on your own." Henry's words cut like a knife to Claire's heart. She left the office feeling like everything she had built was crumbling around her. In the months that followed, Claire faced a storm of lawsuits and debts. The luxurious house she had lived in was auctioned off, her cars were seized, and her accounts were frozen. Her so-called friends vanished, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. With nowhere to go and little money left in her account, Claire was forced to rent a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. For the first time in her life, she was alone, without luxury or support. On her last night in the mansion, Claire sat on the floor of her empty bedroom, surrounded by boxes. In the dim light, she stared at a framed photo of herself and Laura, taken during the opening of an international branch of Luminous Beauty. With tears in her eyes, Claire murmured to herself, "How could I have been so naive?" She lay down on the cold floor, clutching the photo as the sound of rain pattered against the windows. It would be the last night Claire Carter lived as the heiress of an empire. Claire Carter had lost everything: her glamorous life, her friends, and even the trust of her father, Henry. The scandals surrounding the embezzlement at Luminous Beauty had left her completely shattered. The small apartment she had rented was in a neighborhood she barely knew. It was simple and functional: a basic kitchen with second-hand appliances, a sofa, a television, a small table in the corner, a modest bathroom, and a bedroom with a bed and a wardrobe. For Claire, it felt like the opposite of everything she once knew. But at that moment, it was the only place she could call home. That morning, Claire sat at the small table, staring blankly at her laptop screen. She was desperately searching for jobs, but none of her qualifications seemed enough without the financial backing of Luminous Beauty. Then, an ad on the screen caught her attention. "Earn money with flexibility. Become a rideshare driver." Claire laughed at herself. Just a few months ago, she didn't even drive her own car, always chauffeured by private drivers. Now she was considering transporting people to afford her next meal. But the little money she had saved was running out, and desperation overcame her pride. Without overthinking, she filled out the application and scheduled the vehicle inspection. There was just one problem: she no longer had a car. Her luxury vehicle had been repossessed by creditors. Claire picked up her phone and hesitated before dialing. The number belonged to an old acquaintance, Camilla, her distant cousin, and one of the few people who still spoke to her. "Camilla? It's Claire. I need a favor. Can I borrow your car for a while?" 2 days later, Claire was ready for her first day as a driver. She wore jeans and a simple shirt, clothes she hadn't worn in years, purchased from a discount store near her apartment. She got into Camilla's compact car and took a deep breath. The app pinged. "Ride request." With her heart racing, Claire accepted the request. The pickup location was an office building in the downtown area. She drove carefully, trying to ignore the sweat on her hands. When the passenger got into the car, a young executive with headphones and eyes glued to his phone, Claire gave him a nervous smile and said, "Good morning." He simply nodded without looking up. Claire sighed and drove in silence, trying not to dwell on how far she had fallen from her previous life. Throughout the day, Claire faced unexpected situations. An elderly woman criticized her driving, while a hurried young man insisted she speed through traffic, ignoring the risks. In one particularly tense moment, a passenger complained about the air conditioning. Finally, when she parked for a break, Claire sat alone in the car, staring at her hands on the wheel. She felt humiliated, but a voice inside urged her to keep going. This wasn't just a way to make money. It was an opportunity to rebuild herself and prove she was more than the heiress she used to be. That evening, Claire parked in front of a small, popular restaurant known for being cheap and delicious. Exhausted, she used the money from her rides to buy her first decent meal in days. As she walked back to the car, she noticed a young man leaning against a nearby vehicle. He was casually dressed but had a warm, friendly smile. "Busy day?" he asked with a hint of sympathy. Claire hesitated for a moment. "You have no idea," she replied with a tired smile. He extended his hand. "I'm Ryan. I'm a driver too. If you ever need tips, I'm around." Claire shook his hand, surprised by his kindness. "I'm Claire, and it's, well, my first day." Ryan smiled. "Welcome to the club." In that moment, Claire felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Maybe, amid all the changes, she could find something new, something that made it all worthwhile. In the days that followed, Claire began adjusting to her routine as a driver. Although she still felt uneasy, the job offered her something she had never experienced before, the chance to hear real stories. Each passenger was their own universe, full of challenges, dreams, and struggles. One sunny morning, Claire accepted a ride request to the upscale neighborhood where she used to live. When she arrived, a man in an impeccable suit got into the car, his cologne filling the air. As soon as he sat down, he started a phone call. "I can't believe you let this happen!" he shouted at the person on the other end of the line. "I don't pay you to make such basic mistakes." Claire drove in silence, feeling a lump form in her throat. The man's authoritative voice and cold tone reminded her of her father, Henry. When he hung up, he looked at Claire through the rearview mirror. "Can you speed up? I'm late." Claire took a deep breath, fighting the urge to respond sarcastically. She simply nodded and kept driving. At the end of the ride, the man didn't thank her. He just left the car, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts. "Is this what I used to be?" she murmured to herself, a mix of sadness and relief washing over her. Later that afternoon, Claire received another request. When she arrived at the pickup location, Ryan was leaning against her car, smiling. "Claire, we need to stop meeting like this or people will think I'm stalking you." She laughed, the sound coming more easily than she expected. "Need a ride, Ryan? I thought you were a driver too." He pointed to the car beside hers. "I am, but my car broke down. Today, I'm just a passenger." During the ride, Ryan shared stories about his experiences as a driver. He was different from anyone Claire had met before. There was no pretense in his words, only honesty. Gradually, she felt more at ease in his presence. "And you, Claire? How did you end up in this world?" he asked casually. Claire hesitated. She wasn't ready to share her story with a stranger, no matter how friendly he seemed. "Let's just say I needed a change of pace," she replied, with a smile that concealed the truth. Ryan didn't push. He simply smiled back. "Well, whatever the reason, I think you're on the right path." On another day, Claire accepted a short ride request. Mrs. Celine, an elderly woman with white hair and a kind gaze, got into the car carrying a bag full of fruit. "You're new to this, aren't you, dear?" she said as she settled into the back seat. Claire smiled, surprised by the observation. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," Mrs. Celine replied, laughing. "But that's okay. Life teaches us to adapt. Sometimes losing something can be the best thing that happens to us." Claire remained silent, reflecting on those words. When she dropped Mrs. Celine off at her home, the woman handed her an apple from the bag. "For your day, dear. And remember, strength lies in moving forward, even when everything seems lost." Claire thanked her, deeply moved. In that moment, she realized her job was more than a way to pay the bills. It was a lesson in life. That evening, Claire parked near the small apartment where she lived. Ryan was there, leaning against his car, scrolling through his phone. "We meet again," Claire said as she got out of the car. "It's destiny. Or maybe I just live in that building over there," he joked. They talked for a few minutes and Ryan mentioned a meeting spot for rideshare drivers at a nearby cafe. "You should stop by. It's good to meet other drivers, share tips and stories." Claire hesitated but eventually agreed. "Maybe I will. Thanks, Ryan." "Anytime, Claire," he replied, smiling before getting into his car. As Claire climbed the stairs to her apartment, she felt something new within her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of control over her life. Maybe, she thought, this new path wasn't so bad after all. The following week, Claire accepted Ryan's invitation and showed up at the cafe where rideshare drivers often gathered. The place was simple, with wooden tables, a counter with coffee machines, and a chalkboard where the owners wrote funny messages. Ryan was at one of the tables chatting with other drivers. When he saw Claire, he stood up and greeted her with a warm smile. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Claire shrugged, trying to appear casual. "I thought it might be nice to hear some stories. I need tips on surviving critical passengers." Ryan laughed. Well, you're in the right place. We're experts at that here. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone. Claire spent the evening listening to the other drivers share their stories. Some were funny, others frustrating, but the light-hearted tone of the conversation helped her relax for the first time in weeks. Ryan, sitting beside her, made clever and funny comments, but he also observed Claire closely. He could see that beneath her confident demeanor, there was a vulnerability she was trying to hide. As the group began to disperse, Ryan suggested, "Want to take a walk? There's a park nearby. I like to go there when I need to think." Claire hesitated but agreed. As they walked, they talked about trivial things, music, movies, even childhood memories. Then Ryan asked without hesitation, "Claire, have you always been a driver?" She laughed, surprised by the question. "Not exactly. My life was very different before this." "Sounds like there's a story there." He pressed gently but curiously. Claire stopped walking for a moment. She looked at the trees illuminated by the yellow glow of the streetlights and answered, "I used to be an heiress, luminous beauty. Have you heard of it?" Ryan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Of course I have. You owned it?" "I did," Claire said with a wistful smile. "I lost everything. My partner betrayed me. Now I'm here, driving to pay the bills." Ryan didn't try to comfort her. Instead, he replied simply, "Then you must be stronger than you think." Claire looked at him, surprised by his response. "Why do you say that?" "Because you're here, starting over. Most people would have given up. But you didn't." Ryan's words touched something deep within Claire. For the first time, she felt that someone recognized her efforts without judging or underestimating her. A few days later, Ryan invited Claire out again. This time, it was for a food truck festival in the city. "You need to stop living just between rides and home," he said. "And I won't take no for an answer." At the festival, Claire laughed like she hadn't in a long time. Ryan was funny, full of stories, and seemed to have a natural talent for making her feel at ease. They stopped at an ice cream truck and Ryan ordered 2 strange flavors, insisting that Claire try them. "This looks awful," she said, eyeing the ice cream skeptically. "Trust me, I'm an expert in weird combinations." Claire took a bite and, to her surprise, loved it. "Okay, you were right." "I'm always right," he replied, winking. As they walked through the festival, Claire felt something different. It was a lightness she hadn't felt since her life had turned upside down. And as she looked at Ryan, she realized he was part of that. On the way home, they parked in front of Claire's building. Before getting out of the car, she turned to Ryan. "Thank you for today. I really needed this." "It was fun," he replied. "Maybe we can do it again sometime." For a moment, they sat in silence, just looking at each other. It was as if words weren't necessary. Ryan smiled, but before he could say anything, Claire looked away, feeling her heart race. "Good night, Ryan." "Good night, Claire." As Claire climbed the stairs, she realized she was smiling. Maybe, she thought, Ryan was more than just a friend. The thought scared her, but it also made her feel alive again. It was a clear night, but the city felt busy. Claire and Ryan had agreed to meet after their shifts for a quick coffee at a spot where drivers usually rested. They hadn't planned anything beyond that, but life, as always, seemed to have other ideas. Sitting at a table near the window, Claire stirred her cappuccino, while Ryan, arms crossed on the table, watched her. The cafe was nearly empty, with only a few people speaking softly in the background. "You look tired today," Ryan commented. Claire sighed, letting out a faint smile. "I think it's more mental than physical. Driving gives me too much time to think. And thinking, it's not always a good thing." "What do you think about?" he asked, his gaze steady. Claire hesitated. It wasn't easy to open up, but something about Ryan made her feel safe. "Everything I've lost, how naive I was, and..." She paused, searching for the words. "Who I am now. Sometimes I don't even know anymore." Ryan nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Losing something big does that to us. but sometimes it also helps us discover who we really are. Who were you before, Claire? She let out a short laugh, devoid of humor. I was a woman who thought she had everything under control. But the truth is, I was just doing what everyone expected of me. The perfect heiress. Now, with nothing, I don't know. Ryan looked at her for a moment before responding. Maybe who you really are is emerging now. It can be scary, but I think you're on the right path. Claire gave a small sideways smile, surprised at how easily Ryan always seemed to find the right words. Before she could respond, Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and frowned. A friend of mine needs help. His car broke down on a pretty remote road. He's the kind of guy who panics over everything. Want me to take you there? Claire offered suddenly. Ryan looked at her, surprised, but nodded. That would be great. Are you sure? Claire simply picked up her car keys and motioned for him to follow. The road was poorly lit, flanked by tall trees and an unusual silence. Claire drove carefully while Ryan gave her directions. Why's your friend so far out here? Claire asked, trying to break the tension in the quiet. Ryan shrugged. He loves exploring random places, but he's not great at planning how to get back. He's a good guy, just kind of absent-minded. They found the broken-down car at a curve in the road. A young man with glasses was waving both hands, visibly relieved to see Ryan. My hero! The man exclaimed dramatically as he approached. Michael, you really need to start checking your gas tank before heading out, Ryan replied with a tired smile. Claire stood by the car, watching as Ryan helped Michael arrange for a tow. Despite the light-hearted humor, Claire started to feel a slight unease. The road seemed quieter than it should have been. Suddenly, a noise came from the trees. Claire turned quickly, trying to find the source, but saw nothing. Ryan, she called, her voice low. He noticed the tone in her voice and stepped closer, becoming alert. What is it? I think I heard something over there. Claire pointed to the forest beside them. Before Ryan could respond, another sound came, louder this time. A figure emerged from the trees, and for a moment, Claire held her breath. It was a dog, skinny and scared. Ryan exhaled, relaxing. Just a dog, Claire. Looks like he's hungry. She laughed nervously. What a scare. I was already imagining the worst. Ryan approached the dog, who hesitated at first but eventually allowed him to get close. Claire watched, captivated by Ryan's patience. Hey, buddy, Ryan said, petting the dog gently. Looks like you're all alone out here. Do you think he was abandoned? Claire asked, crouching next to Ryan. Probably. He glanced at Claire with a smile. I think we've got a new mission. With Michael on his way home in a taxi, Claire and Ryan returned to the city with the dog in the back seat. The dog seemed grateful, curling up between them. I guess we'll need to give him a name, Ryan said, looking in the rearview mirror. How about Lucky? Claire suggested. He seems like he's found a second chance today. Ryan smiled. I like it. Welcome, Lucky. The rest of the ride was filled with laughter and light-hearted conversation. When they arrived at Claire's building, Ryan carried the dog to the door. Looks like you've got a new friend, Claire, Ryan said. No, I think we do, she replied with a smile. When Ryan looked at her, Claire felt her heart race again. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but just smiled instead. See you tomorrow, Claire. See you tomorrow, Ryan. As Claire walked into her apartment with Lucky by her side, she felt something different. It wasn't just a connection. It was something more. Something that was beginning to grow. Quietly, but deeply. It was a clear night, with a gentle breeze making the leaves on the trees dance. Claire and Ryan had decided to take Lucky for a walk after dinner, but instead of heading home, they found themselves stopping at a small hill overlooking the city. They sat on the grass side by side with Lucky lying nearby, watching them both. The city looks so small from up here, Claire remarked, gazing at the bright lights in the distance. I think it's because we finally stopped to really look at it, Ryan replied, his voice calm. Sometimes everything feels big and overwhelming, but when you change your perspective, things start to make sense. Claire chuckled softly. You always have some philosophical answer, don't you? Ryan shrugged, smiling. I'm just trying to impress you. Claire turned to him, surprised by his honesty. For a moment, she said nothing, her heart beginning to race. I think it's working, she whispered. Ryan's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. He leaned in slightly, pausing as if asking for permission. Claire didn't pull back. Instead, she leaned forward until their faces were just inches apart. The kiss was soft, tender, filled with unspoken emotions. Lucky, sensing the moment, stood up and jumped between them, causing them to burst into laughter. I think he doesn't want to share you with me, Ryan said, laughing. Maybe he's just reminding us that we're not alone. Claire smiled, petting Lucky, but her eyes stayed locked on Ryan's. It was a simple moment, but Claire felt something powerful. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. She realized her feelings for Ryan were genuine, real, and unique. Claire and Ryan's meetings became more frequent after that. He spent many nights at her place, and their connection seemed to grow naturally, as if it had always been there. One evening, as Claire was adjusting a pillow on the couch, Ryan watched her with a gaze that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Claire, he began, his tone soft but steady. She paused what she was doing and looked at him, curious. Ryan took her hands, his eyes fixed on hers. I've never felt this way before. It's like everything in my life has led me to you. I think you're the love of my life. Claire stayed silent for a moment, taking in his words. A gentle smile spread across her face as she replied, I'm in love with you too, Ryan. I never imagined that, in the middle of all the chaos in my life, I would find someone like you. Ryan couldn't resist. He leaned in and kissed her deeply, with tenderness and passion. When their lips parted, he smiled and asked, Claire, will you be my girlfriend? She widened her eyes in surprise before laughing softly. Ryan, we see each other every day, laugh together, share everything. I thought I already was your girlfriend. He laughed with her but kept his gaze serious. You are, but I want you to know officially that it's only you. Claire laughed again, her heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. Then yes, I will, she said happily. At that moment, Claire realized how different her new life was from everything she had known before. It was simple, genuine, and most importantly, it made her happy. Truly happy. A few days later, on a morning when Claire woke up alone, she was startled by the insistent ringing of her phone. Lucky barked excitedly as she tried to figure out who was calling so early. Hello? She said groggily. Claire, it's Beatrice, your lawyer. I have news. Laura Mendez has been arrested. Claire sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What? How? She tried to enter Switzerland with a fake passport and was detained. During the investigation, authorities uncovered her involvement in the embezzlement at Luminous Beauty. She's being extradited and will be tried for it. Claire put her hand to her forehead, trying to process the information. Does this mean... It means we have a real chance of recovering part of what was taken from you. We're already filing a new claim for restitution. But more importantly, justice will be served. Claire was silent for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. Thank you, Beatrice. Truly. When she hung up, Claire looked at Lucky, who was watching her intently. Looks like the tide has turned, buddy. That evening, Claire met Ryan at the cafe. He noticed the different glow in her eyes the moment she walked in. Something good happened, he said, pulling out a chair for her. Claire smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. Laura was arrested, and now there's a chance I can recover part of what I lost. Ryan looked at her for a moment before smiling. That's amazing, Claire. You deserve this. I don't think I'll get everything back, but I'm happy to know she'll face consequences for what she did. Someday, I hope she understands what it means to live with dignity. Ryan reached across the table and held her hand gently. You've already won, Claire. Even without all that, you rebuilt your life. I'm proud of you. Claire felt her eyes fill with tears, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. In the months that followed, Claire attended Laura's trial. Each hearing was a mix of emotions: relief at seeing justice served and sadness for everything she had lost by blindly trusting the wrong person. However, by the end of the process, Claire managed to recover part of the assets that had been stolen. With the money, she knew she could start over, but in a different way. She didn't want to return to the excessive luxury that had once surrounded her. Now she saw things differently, focusing on what truly mattered. A few days later, Claire visited her cousin Camilla, carrying a basket filled with flowers and chocolates. She rang the doorbell, and Camilla opened the door with a warm smile. Claire, what a nice surprise. Come in, please. Claire handed over the basket and hugged her. I had to come in person. I wanted to thank you for everything. The car you lent me was more than just transportation. It was my chance to start over. Camilla smiled, setting the basket on the table. Oh, Claire, you don't need to thank me for that, but I'm glad it helped. Claire sighed. It was more than that, Camilla. You were the only one who reached out when I was at my lowest. I'll never forget it. The two shared a heartfelt hug, and Claire left feeling reassured that she had people she could count on, even in her darkest moments. On a sunny day, Claire and Ryan sat in the living room, discussing ideas for a new project. Claire had notebooks scattered across the table, and a sparkle in her eyes that Ryan hadn't seen in a long time. I've been thinking about something more meaningful, Claire began, gesturing with enthusiasm. A solidarity-based transportation service, something that connects drivers and passengers on a more human level. Ryan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Well, rides wouldn't just be about getting someone from point A to point B. They'd be about hearing stories, offering comfort, affordable fares, but with a personal touch. I want the drivers to be trained for that, to create a better experience for everyone. Ryan smiled. That's brilliant, Claire. You've turned what you went through as a driver into something much bigger. She laughed a little shyly. It's my way of giving back. I think driving taught me that everyone has a story, and all of them matter. Ryan took her hand and squeezed it gently. I'm in. I want to be by your side for this. Claire looked at him, surprised but deeply moved. Really? Of course. This is what I've always wanted. To work on something meaningful, with someone who truly matters to me. Lucky, who had been napping in the corner, let out a soft bark, as if giving his approval to the plan. Claire's life was no longer simple in material terms. She had a beautiful apartment, a new car, functional and comfortable but without the extravagance of her past. And she had resumed going to the salon, something she genuinely missed. But more importantly, she now had something she had never experienced before: a light heart, full of humility and gratitude. As she and Ryan worked together on their new project, Claire felt her life taking on a greater purpose. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about people, about stories, about giving back. Henry, Claire's father, sought her out after the trial. He arrived at her new apartment as elegant as ever, but with a more subdued expression than usual. Claire welcomed him into the living room, where Lucky played distractedly in the corner. For a moment, silence filled the room until Henry broke the tension. Claire, I'm here because I need to say something. He paused, glancing around before meeting her eyes. You're stronger than I ever imagined. I'm proud of who you've become. Claire raised her eyebrows slightly, surprised by his words. Throughout her life, Henry had rarely shown any affection or recognition. Thank you, Dad, she responded, her voice measured but devoid of emotion. Henry seemed uneasy, as though carefully choosing his words. I want you to come back to Luminous Beauty. You'll be our new CEO. I think it's the right time. Claire let out a small laugh, almost as a reflex. It wasn't mocking, but the reaction of someone who had moved past the pain and now saw the situation with clarity. Dad, I appreciate the offer and your words, but no. Her answer was firm, but not hostile. Henry frowned. No? You've always dreamed of this. Why not now, when everything is falling back into place? Claire took a deep breath before replying, her voice calm but full of conviction. I've always dreamed of being valued, Dad, of doing something meaningful. But when everything fell apart, you weren't supportive. You blamed me and cast me out. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. In that moment, I realized that the support I had always hoped for from you would never come. Henry opened his mouth to respond, but Claire continued, resolute. Today I see that I don't need the company's validation or your approval to be who I am. I've built a life I'm proud of, surrounded by people who truly care about me. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Henry looked unsettled, but Claire remained steady. There was a lightness in her words that showed she bore no resentment, only certainty that it was time to move forward. I hope Luminous Beauty thrives, Dad, and I wish the same for you. But I won't return. I want to build something of my own, something that reflects my purpose. Henry didn't push further. He stood, adjusting his suit, and before leaving, he said, You've changed a lot, Claire, more than I thought possible, and for that, I respect you. Claire smiled faintly, but this time without bitterness. Thank you. I hope you find what you're looking for someday, too. After Henry left, Claire felt something surprising. Relief. She had finally closed a chapter in her life. Though she still felt a slight sting from all he had done, his refusal to take responsibility, and the way he had abandoned her when she needed him most, Claire knew that holding on to resentment wasn't the answer. Her father was part of her past, and now her focus was on the present. Claire looked at Lucky, who came up to her, wagging his tail as if to say everything was all right. That's it, buddy. We move forward, no looking back, she said, stroking his head. The Claire who once sought approval and recognition now understood that true value lay in living by her principles, humility, gratitude, and love for what truly mattered. Her life felt lighter, more authentic. She had purpose with her new project, loyal friends, a sincere love in Ryan, and Lucky, who always seemed to know exactly when she needed comfort. Claire no longer desired the illusion of perfection she once had. She wanted the simplicity of truth, and she felt that she had finally found it. After her father left, leaving behind the echo of overdue words, Claire's phone vibrated on the table. It was the 5th time that day. On the screen, a familiar name appeared, one of her old friends, the kind who had vanished when she lost everything. Since the trial ended and news spread that Claire had regained part of her fortune, the calls and messages had come flooding back. Invitations to dinners, questions about trips, false compliments laced with hidden intentions. Claire knew exactly what it meant. They weren't interested in the Claire she was now, the one learning to value the simple and the authentic. No, they wanted the heiress she used to be. They wanted the parties, the exclusive trips, and the sparkle she could provide. Claire picked up the phone and stared at the screen for a moment before sighing deeply. She no longer felt anger, just a calm exhaustion that came from someone who finally understood what truly mattered. Without replying, she pressed the button to silence the device. Lucky appeared at her side, wagging his tail and holding his favorite toy in his mouth. Claire smiled, picking up the ball to play with him. You know, Lucky, I think I've had enough friends for a lifetime. Now I just want the ones who really matter. On a peaceful afternoon, Claire, Ryan, and Lucky strolled through the park. The dog ran joyfully after a ball, while Claire and Ryan walked hand in hand. I think I finally understand what less is more really means, Claire said, watching Lucky play. Ryan looked at her with a smile. And now you have everything that matters. Claire nodded, her eyes shining. Yes, I have you, Lucky, and a purpose. What more could I want? Ryan stopped, gently holding her face in his hands. I just hope to be part of this new life forever. Claire smiled and replied, You already are. As the sun set, painting the sky in golden hues, Claire felt a profound sense of peace. She was no longer the lost heiress. She was Claire, strong, resilient, and ready to embrace the future alongside those who truly mattered. I hope you were moved by this story filled with love, challenges, and transformations. If you enjoyed it and want to keep following inspiring narratives like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Stories for You channel. Here, every story is a new journey, designed to touch your heart and spark meaningful reflections. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts and ideas for future stories. Your opinion is very important to us. Thank you for being with us, and see you next time.